Hi, everybody. It's Angelo Caruso. I'm here with Dana Vogelmeier. She's in Ohio. Hi, Dana.
Hi, Michael.
Dana is one of the most interesting people I've met in a while. She helps companies solve a problem that is very, very serious. And a lot of times the companies don't even know they have the problem. She helps companies improve workplace culture. Do I have that correct?
That is correct.
I want to learn more about this. Before we get started, please know that you are welcome, of course, to like or comment on this video if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube and you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, you'll see more interviews with interesting people like Dana Vogelmeier. The company, Dana, is Vogelmeier Consulting. And before we're done here, we're going to help people understand all the crazy stuff that happens in the workplace, why people would hire someone like you to come in and fix things for them, and what a monumental task that can be sometimes, because culture is a hard thing to move. Why is culture so obstinate?
Well, I think one of the big reasons is because it's so ingrained and sometimes we don't even realize it. Like something is part of the culture and no one's ever even defined it or said, what are the things? Because culture is really about like how we do things around here. So what is our way? What are our signs? What words do we use? What do we accept or not accept? And it's kind of like you can get into complacency and just going with emotions day in and day out, and you don't purposefully examine those things that might not be helping you get to the next level, you know, to increase your retention of employees or increase your productivity. We just do what we've always done.
You know, I do a fair amount of work with various companies myself, and I always see when I go into the companies, I think we confuse culture for mission statements and vision statements and our handbook of policy and procedures. You know, that's not your culture. In fact, the things that you address are sometimes the things that are unwritten in the policy and procedure manual. And by the way, not for nothing, everybody, most corporate mission statements, which companies spend scads of time on, you know, collecting the, you know, the whiteboards and the papers, the Post-its around the room, and then they synthesize it all down to one, then they wordsmith it. They pay companies, you know, big money to do this. And I rarely see a mission statement or a vision statement that looks different than anybody else's. Everybody wants to provide quality products and services to their team. They want to do it in a, what's another buzzword, a diverse organization that values the individual. I mean, you see the same stuff over and over again, right?
Right.
And yet each company is special and has its own culture. That's the stuff that you don't see on the website, in my opinion.
That's right. That's what the people are saying about the organization. That's really what the culture is. And so do the employees speak highly of the organization?
And in some cases, it's not what they're saying at work, it's what they're saying over a beer at the pub. Right. That's the culture. Fascinating. Dana, everybody, is started Vogelmeier Consulting to, as we say, help with these workplace culture scenarios. She has 35 years of work experience, including 25 years of leading diverse teams. There's that word again. And working for a multitude of leaders. Over the years, she began to examine the differences to the teams that she worked in and led. By your own admission, some of those teams ran like magic and some of them struggled to find harmony. So she decided to open her own shingle, and now she's working with technology firms, school districts, banks, insurance companies, anybody that has issues like this. You have a master's degree in leadership. Good for you. I know some leaders that I wished had a master's degree in leadership. Designation of Certified Professional in Talent Development, that's CPTD, to those of you not in the trade. And you're a facilitator for an organization that you've talked about a lot, the Association of Talent Development. You're actively involved at the local and national level, that's Ohio to you and me, with the Association of ATD, and also with Rotary International. So you're a fellow Rotarian. I appreciate you. And I think that's how our worlds collided initially, is Rotary connections. We're also both, by the way, students of the speaking trade. And I know that you do great work live, and you're working to improve, as we all are, our online presence, especially in light of the fact that online training is becoming suddenly more popular? What are some of the trends that you see in workplace culture? Why do you keep getting phone calls?
So I think one of the big things is there are no shortage of jobs out there that are unfilled. And if you're an employer that's trying really hard to get good talent and retain that talent, then you've got to offer something better than your competitors, whatever that might be. So we hear things like, the ping pong tables and, that kind of stuff, or a different kind of perk like unlimited vacation. And none of those are going to matter if people go to work and they feel like they're treated poorly.
Yeah.
And if they drive in every day thinking, I hate going to work here, or I don't like my boss, or I don't like my coworkers. Those things matter, and people will go somewhere else and even take less money, fewer perks, longer drive to get away from some of those bad things. So you really have to examine why people are leaving or why we're not getting a lot of productivity. And it doesn't even have to be leaving, because sometimes the people who aren't great or aren't good stay and just do just enough to not get fired. And that's hurting you. That's hurting your bottom line and your productivity.
Yeah, that's a bigger problem than them leaving, is staying and being unhappy.
Right.
Cars don't rust anymore, but back in the day, the analogy I used was, it was like you had a piece of rust on your car. I mean, you're never ever going to fix that. You can try to contain it and mitigate it, but it's always going to be that weaker piece of quarter panel, that's been eaten out by salt in the wintertime or whatever, corrosive in nature. So you make an interesting point that when companies try to differentiate and tell us how great they are and how special they are, they always mention the stuff. We have ping pong tables. We have more personal days, and whatever acronym you're using to describe it. But for them to talk about the feeling that companies have, this feeling of loyalty, this feeling of community, that's a hard thing to put into writing and then not sound sappy.
Right.
It reminds me of Rotary a bit, actually, because that's one of the Rotary's challenges. Rotary is a hard sell to some people because it's hard to talk about that feeling that you have when you do something nice for other people. So when you go into these companies, you've got to get people to talk about their feelings, I'm assuming. How's that go?
Yes. And sometimes it's even too just kind of walking in and looking around, and are people smiling, and what words are being used? Are they cordial with one another? Are you hearing nothing? Or are they being mean to each other? Sometimes even things like, is the place dirty? How do employees feel about taking care of the work environment? What are the signs that are up? And one really simple one that I pointed out one time was, when people walked in, there was a sign with the red circle and then the line through it, and there was a gun, and it said no weapons allowed.
Yeah.
And it was inside the company. It wasn't like on the outside that you see a lot of times,
Yeah.
And so I felt like, okay, I'm walking into this department, which is the department I was doing work for. And I said, it doesn't feel very welcoming. Couldn't you instead, we're already inside, remember, so couldn't you instead have a sign that says, have a great day, or thanks for being here, we appreciate you? Yeah. That's going to give me a different feeling when I walk into that department.
The no gun sign on the inside of the building has my mind alive. And we don't have that here in Michigan, even though there's what's called open carry. And by the way, this is an important part of this conversation. It is not a tangent, because society is changing everybody, and workplace cultures are changing with them. Just a little preamble to what I'm about to say. Each generation seems like it's more casual than the generation before it. Think about how people used to dress 200 years ago, just men's attire. We had hats, we had an extra collar on our shirt, we had a vest and a jacket and an overcoat. We had spats and suspenders and all this, bling. And now you're lucky if you can get people to wear long pants and socks to work.
That's right.
So, and also language has become more casual. So a lot of stuff's changing. Back to the gun thing. So to me, because I'm not a gun person, and not that I don't need to get political here. It's just who I am as a person. I'm not a gun person. So when I'm walking into a building and it has a sign that says no guns allowed, first thing I start to think is, well, they must have had gun issues here before, which is a negative for me, right? Like if I had a choice between which insurance broker to use and one of them didn't have a gun issue and one of them did, I'm not sure I would make my decision based on that alone, but it goes into the blender. Right. And so when I see the sign on the inside that says no guns, I'm thinking these people have issues and they're crazy. You know, the sign's in the wrong place, man.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely right. Good. And, you know, when you say that about the clothing too, you know, that speaks to the culture. And, you know, if people want to come in wearing something casual, I think that's one thing, but is it professional? And like it or not, it speaks to the organization and what kind of things you stand for, what do you tolerate, what do you accept. Yeah. And, you know, I think you can still be casual and you can be clean and professional.
You think?
I do think. But when I started, I remember many, many years ago, and I'm sorry about that, we had to wear closed-toed shoes and pantyhose. And
I remember that. I remember those days.
Yeah, yeah. And then over time, and I even remember having a conversation with one of my friends once saying, I wore open-toed shoes to work today. Like that was a huge deal, you know? Why did women, but that's what you're saying, you know, over time, different things.
Yeah, so why did that happen? Why don't women wear pantyhose to work? And this sounds like a dumbass question. I actually don't know the answer. Why don't women wear pantyhose to work anymore?
They're uncomfortable. That's my opinion.
But they were uncomfortable back then.
Yeah, but you had to wear them back then.
Who said?
It was a rule at work. You know, closed-toed shoes.
All work.
Closed-heeled and pantyhose.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then somebody decides, like there was a memo.
Yeah, like going to casual dress was a huge memo.
It started with Casual Friday, as I recall.
Right.
It was Casual Friday, now it's casual every day.
Yeah, now it's casual every day. And people wear flip-flops.
Yeah.
And that does show a little more relaxed, and it might be okay. I think it depends on what it is you're selling, what it is you're representing. I don't know, this is just me personally. I don't know if when I go in to see my CPA to do my taxes, I do not want to see my CPA wearing shorts and a Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops. It gives me a thought about what this work environment is like. And I want to know it's accurate. He's paying attention to all the details. He's professional. He's knowledgeable. Don't get me in any trouble. I'm hiring you to not do these things wrong. I don't know the rules. So I want to know who I'm dealing with and what kind of a work environment is in
So
there.
the no flip-flops thing and no pantyhose, or yes, pantyhose thing, that's like an easy read in a policy and procedure manual. For me, the more troublesome stuff, and maybe this is a stickier wicket for you too, because you're the one who has to communicate to these decision makers about, and influencers, how they're going to improve their culture, is how do you say, well, you can wear flip-flops, but you're going to have to cut your toenails more than once every 3 months. Because it's the nuance. It's not, because you almost can't push back against casual footwear anymore. I remember Starbucks said for a long time, no visible ink. You remember this?
No.
And then they walked it back because they had trouble finding enough people who were willing to work that didn't have visible ink. I mean, they bothered to get all of this adornment, and then they damn well want to make sure people see it. And then Starbucks was supposed to be this progressive company that had this forward-leaning culture, you know. But then I'm looking at my watch. The policy and procedure manual said no visible ink, and everybody's like, "Who are you really?" Mm-hmm. And they had to recant. And now, of course, all things are allowed. I think piercings, and I'd be interested to see how if they cordon off any type of physical, what psychologists call signaling. Mm-hmm. What is your experience with companies? How do they draw that line in the sand for different types of adornment?
Mm-hmm. Well, so on that kind of an issue, I think that speaks to what you were talking about too, about how times have changed. That is much more mainstream now and very common at all ages. So, you know, I think, is that really the the hill you want to plant your flag on, you know, because that is going to impact who you can hire if you said, I don't want that. And it's so, like I said, mainstream and acceptable at this point that why would you say we're not going to do that? I think you'd have to examine that. But if you were an organization that said absolutely not, then that's the kind of culture that you're creating. It's a different experience. It's a different expectation. I think another good example is Uber. Remember the early days of Uber and some of the things that corporate-wide, not talking necessarily about the drivers, but in corporate in their early days, the things that they did.
Yeah.
And a lot of those things were very kind of partying and, you know, going to having their celebrations in Las Vegas, and
they got in trouble for some of the stuff.
Yeah, and got into some trouble. So then they've had to create some change in their culture, and even brought in a new CEO with that specific charge that, you know, these are not things that are okay. We're not going to tolerate this kind of behavior. So even allegations of things like drugs and stuff like that.
Yeah. When does this specificity about what kind of culture we want, when does that start bumping up against things like diversity and like personal values and discrimination? You know, yeah, that tattoo's good, that tattoo's good, that one, no, we can't hire you. I'm sure you'd never say that in a job interview, but that may be how it shakes out, that that person's just a little bit over the top. What are the ACLU? What's that called?
ACLU.
ACLU, civil liberties people. What do they say about this stuff?
So I don't know what the ACLU says regarding that kind of thing or regarding that kind of issue. I do think that you have to look at things from the perspective of mainstream acceptance balanced with personal, this is who I am, as a person. These are my unique characteristics and strengths and talents and what I bring to the table. And then there's that third part of, is there something offensive? If you had a tattoo that was the F word, for example, that might not be something that you want your customers coming in and seeing. Yeah. So I don't know what the laws are around that, but I do think there's that delicate balance that you need to think about.
Well, plus with culture, it's not just what you see the day you hire the person, because they come into work the next day, they roll up their sleeves and there's the F word, or they decide to grow their hair long after they're at the company, or a bunch of people at the company decide to grow their hair long. For those of you watching this video, ipso facto, we're in the midst of the COVID-19 crisis of 2020. I don't know what we're going to call it later. I'm referring it to as the great COVID-19 slowdown of 2020.
Yeah.
3 days ago, the midnight shift at Mount Sinai Hospital in Michigan, I'm ashamed to say, went on strike, allegedly to protest poor working conditions. So where everybody's mind went right away was, well, we don't have enough ventilators, we don't have enough protection, and we don't want to work under these conditions anymore. But if you dug deeper into the story, they had been sparring with management. Union had been sparring with management about pay for several years. And COVID-19 was like the straw that broke the camel's back. I imagine at some point the tail starts to wag the dog. You can set up whatever kind of culture you want. If the team decides to do a mutiny, you've got a fork in the road. And do you get called in for those type of scenarios?
So I could potentially, and I will share one specific example that I had where a particular unit in this large division wanted to strike. And what happened instead was I was part of that leadership team. And so there were 3 of us in this leadership structure. And we kind of had some conversation about it and everything and brought the group in. We had heard that they wanted us to go on strike because, and they were not union, they just wanted to walk out. They wanted to strike because they felt that they did more work than all the other teams. And they thought this because of the shift that they were on. It was just in their minds, like, we do more work, so we should get paid more. And I pulled the data to compare whether or not they did do more work, because that's what they were alleging. So when we brought them in, we had that information kind of in our back pocket, but it really became a conversation around, we heard you were going to walk out, and we had this meeting before that happened. And first, before you were going to do that, why wouldn't you talk to us? Because we had worked really hard to create a great workplace, really hard, very intentional about meeting with people all the time, being visible, being open, having lots of like open door meetings or talent focus group meetings and things like that. We were very intentional about creating a great workplace.
Yeah.
We had good rewards. And so we were kind of hurt, like, why wouldn't you at least just talk to us first? And then starting that conversation, and then people said, well, this or whatever. But I mean, it moved into a whole different conversation. We never even had to get into the conversation about the data.
I would think that one of the tenets, the unstanding, unshakable tenets of a good, strong workplace would be good comms, good communication. Mm-hmm. Is there a short punch list of 2 or 3 or 4 things that you say every good workplace culture should have?
Yes, for sure. I would say communication is at the top of the list. And then that builds into those good relationships. Because I think if you have a good work relationship with your boss, that is of the utmost importance. You need to know that your boss cares about you and knows you as a human, in addition to someone at work and what your work dreams are, but also good colleagues and coworkers in a team. And I read all the stuff from Gallup because they do a lot of research on this kind of thing. And one of the stats from Gallup that I love says that you are 150% more likely to stay at a job where you have a best friend at work.
Yeah.
Because you look forward to seeing your best friend every day when you go in.
Yeah, 100%.
It gives you a good feeling and you like them, right? So you're not going to leave there. I won't see my best friend every day.
Yeah. Marcus Buckingham, one of the co-authors of First Break All the Rules, said that the relationship between the middle manager and the subordinate is the most important relationship at any organization. It wasn't how the president and CEO related to everybody. It was this day-to-day thing.
Right.
That's where the magic was.
Right. Because those are the people doing like the work with your customer, and how people feel and speak with customers, the quality of the product is a direct reflection of how engaged they are at work. Like if they don't care whether or not, the boss is happy or if the company is successful, it's going to be reflected in the product.
Right. So good comms, good relationships, integrity and trust, I'm guessing, is another one.
Certainly trust. Yeah. And I think that comes in with those relationships.
Okay.
I think visibility is important. You don't want to be always kind of tucked away. It just breeds people to think like, what's going on? Is there something that maybe there's happening behind the scenes we don't know about? And I also think, especially at that frontline level, good rewards. And it doesn't always have to be money. It can sometimes just be a thank you, or, some kind of other recognition. But, think about that for even you, Michael, or anybody that maybe has been in the work world. If you're not appreciated or valued, do you really want to go in and do great work?
Yeah, 100%.
Probably
I worked at a company for a while, and they had a pretty good work culture, I think, if you polled everybody in the company. I was on the sales team, and the sales manager was rolling out another incentive program. This is very common in the sales trade for the next quarter or whatever. And the reward, let's say it was a flat screen TV or something. And they roll it out. We're going to give you stuff if you perform. I didn't like those contests. And finally, my sales manager called me into her office, and she said, it doesn't seem like you like these contests. It doesn't seem like you even try to win the prize. And I said, well, you're right. I don't. I'm not really motivated by winning a prize. And besides, when one of us wins the prize, all the rest of us have to lose the prize. I mean, what's so incentivizing about that? About that time, she's sorry she even called me into the office. But then she got to the gist of it, and she said, well, what does motivate you, Michael? And I say, well, I like attention. And it was like I had tossed a live grenade into her tent. She didn't even know what to do with that. Mm-hmm. Attention in the terms of, and when I was speaking of, and we talk more about it later, compliments, praise, maybe asking me to take part in the training sessions where I could parlay a little bit of information, something I was good at maybe for the rest of the team. And I don't think she ever got it, Dana, even though I explained it to her several times. It just wasn't something that culture was able to proffer.
Yeah.
Do you run into companies that, I mean, they pay you money to tell them what to do, you tell them what to do, and then they either do this or they can't do it for some reason?
Yeah, not everybody loves it. Kind of like your example, like she had one thought. She didn't have the growth mindset, right? She had one thought, well, everybody will work for this incentive, and people are different. But, I remember one in particular with a school district that I worked with, and one of the leaders, really the biggest issue within that organization came from one small unit. And it was really two people in that unit that were stirring it up for everybody else.
Wow.
And the leader of that group just kind of, shrugged his shoulders a little bit, like, well, that's how they are.
Yeah.
And sure, that is how they are, but you as the leader have a responsibility to help them understand the impact they're having on others and the impact that's having on their career, their raises, their productivity. It's more than, just, oh, that's how someone is. And sometimes when you help someone see how they are, like hold the mirror up and say, when you say that, this is how everybody else feels, or this is what they hear, or this is what they think of you. That can really influence somebody. That can change. And I remember that happening to me as a very young leader. When I very first became a leader, one of my most favorite boss of all time, he gave me some really tough feedback. And it was literally like he held the mirror in front of me and said, when you say that, like he gave a specific example, when you say that, this is what everybody else in the room thought. And I was like, oh, well, I didn't mean for it to come out like that. And he's like, I know that, but no one else did. So that feedback helped me change, and it helped influence how productive my team was.
But don't we get to a place where it's the same feedback, ad nauseum, year after year, and these people start feeling like, nothing they can say or do will make those two people happy? Are you saying that you should never, ever stop trying? Or are you saying you can try to a certain point and then there might be some other contingency plans?
Yeah. So I like how you say that. I call it redirect them. And sometimes you have to redirect them outside the organization. If they're hindering your team and your productivity and your profitability, they're not a good member. And it's that old adage about the right person in the right seat on the right bus. They're not what you need. And they, sometimes even they're nice people and they just don't know how to do the tasks, or the tasks have changed and now they can't change with that job. If it's somebody you want to keep, you might be able to put them in another role. But you have to think about what's best for the organization.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is redirecting out. Sometimes it could be redirecting to another job or another area of the organization. That's widely, as a leader, it's hard. You've got to make those tough calls sometimes. And it's not all going to be easy, or you wouldn't be needed.
Yeah. Well, you certainly know what you're talking about. I can see why you're in demand for this type of thing, not only in the Midwest, but points unknown. For those of you that want to know more about Dana and what she does, she's at Vogelmeier Consulting, and I shall spell it for you. VOGELMEIER Consulting is just like it sounds. Vogelmeier is not too far off. And I'll put information about this into the show notes where people can find you. You see any trends coming up, things that business owners and HR people can keep an eye on? Is it going to be more of the same?
Well, I think this unique time that we're in right now, the COVID crisis, and there's a lot more, companies are impacted, and so businesses are impacted. They're laying off or furloughing or whatever. And I do think people need to be more compassionate about the situation, and not, as a leader, not think so much about yourself, but like these other folks that maybe you are laying off. It could be you next. But I think that compassionate leadership is really important. I also think that in these unique times when people are so stressed out because they might have kids at home and they're teaching their kids, or maybe somebody in the household lost a job or whatever it is. You know, having a little grace with people can go a long way in how that relationship will build. It's just a different time, and to manage in the same exact way that you did when everything pre-coronavirus won't be the same. I also just shared recently with one of my clients, and I'm happy to send it to you, Michael, too, 10 ways to have fun and levity when you're meeting like this now. Because it is hard, it is stressful. Sometimes tough decisions have to be made, and people are having tough things going on at home. So if you can add a little bit of levity and make people smile and feel a little bit better for 10 minutes in a meeting by doing something fun, I think that's really important right now. And we will change and evolve to something different than what we're in today, what we were in before, but you have to adapt is really the key, and not just go through the motions. You really need to pay attention.
I love it. You've got a fantastic Facebook group that I belong to. Will you tell people how they can join it and get ongoing tips and strategies and good examples of corporations and businesses doing the right thing for their cultures? How can people join this group?
Yes, it's on Facebook called Making Great Workplaces. And I share tips and ideas and strategies about how to make a great workplace. And I ask other people to share their ideas too. So you'll see mostly what's on there comes from me, but you might see some comments from other people about some things they're doing.
Fantastic. Well, you're a good person, you're talented, and I couldn't think of a better person for the job of improving workplaces all over North America. Thanks for all you do, Dana.
Thank you, Michael. I'm back at you.
My pleasure. So it's Vogelmeier Consulting, everybody, Dana Vogelmeier, and this is something that you have to be vigilant about, because these cultural shifts happen almost undercover, you know, in the darkness of the night. You get up one day, you come into work, how did we get to be like this? Mm-hmm. And it's because somebody took their eye off the ball or whatever. I just think vigilance has its own reward. Dana, thanks again.
Thank you. I appreciate it.